Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fernpate Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. Are you looking for strategies to help you provide feedback and provide a sense of community and teamwork in your course? Well, our guest today, Dr. Amanda Joyce, will be providing you with some strategies to do so. Dr. Joyce, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Amanda Joyce. I originally came from a small town just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I ended up going to undergraduate college in Charlotte, and then moved on to graduate school in Virginia, hung out there for several years where I studied childhood development, and then I came to Murray State. This is my 6th year here in Kentucky, and I am a developmental psychologist who studies early childhood self-regulation, but I also have a big research focus and a personal interest in student learning and the sorts of things that make the classroom most efficient.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, because I know you have a wealth of experience and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So the title of your strategy is Using Scaffolding to Enhance Student Efficacy on Long-Term Projects. For those of us who might not be familiar with these concepts, could you help us understand what is scaffolding and then what is self-efficacy?
Sure. So scaffolding is a term that I'm borrowing from a psychologist from about 100 years ago, Vygotsky. He was very interested in what he called the zone of proximal development. And this is an area of learning where people learn best. And in order to get into that area, it involves a lot of scaffolding from other people. Now that makes more sense in the context of a particular example. So I am going to gratuitously talk about my daughter, who within the last several months learned how to walk. So when she first started walking, what she could do was she could walk while holding on to furniture. But that was the best that she could do on her own. But if I took her hands and I held them up, we could walk to the center of the room together. Vygotsky would say that I was keeping her in her zone of proximal development, and I was scaffolding her to do that by holding her hands and walking her to the center of the room. I was helping her to do more than she could do on her own by holding her hands. Now, scaffolding is something that can go into a classroom environment as well. Our students often come into the classroom completely overwhelmed by all of these new things that we ask them to do, and we can kind of metaphorically hold their hands and walk them to the center of the room. We can give them lots of resources, lots of timelines, lots of help along the way to help them get to that final project. Now, ultimately with scaffolding, I'm hoping to improve their learning, and I think I can improve their learning through self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is also a term by an old psychologist, Albert Bandura. So self-efficacy, according to him, is this sense of your capability in a particular domain. So if you have high self-efficacy in a particular class, you think, oh, I can do really well in here. If you have low self-efficacy, you think, oh, this is going to be really hard. Now, if you teach a dreaded course, you probably have a lot of students who come in with really low self-efficacy. They think this is all overwhelming and I can't handle this. But if we can boost that self-efficacy through scaffolding, then they can learn a little bit better and we can have a more positive classroom environment.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for explaining those concepts to us. I think that was helpful. And for those of us who were familiar with the concept, it was a good reminder too. So tell us, what impressed you to start using these strategies and how has it worked for you?
So I initially came to Murray State without using a whole lot of those strategies. And what I found is that I had a lot of students who were completely overwhelmed. So I would put out a big final assignment and I would remind them of deadlines throughout the semester, but we'd get to the end of the semester and I would ultimately get several assignments that looked like they were written in an hour before the deadline. They looked like draft quality. And initially my grumpy thought was, oh my goodness, look at this laziness. And then I realized, no, it's something way more than that. This is reflecting maybe poor time management, maybe really high stress, getting overwhelmed in the details of an assignment and not knowing where to start. It was a lot more than just putting it off. And so I started adding in some extra things into the class. Within different classes, I have different big projects, but I'll just use one of my adolescent psychology class for an example. In that class, students come in, they learn about adolescent development, and I want them to apply what they're learning. And so they would interview a real life adolescent and then write a final paper connecting that adolescent's development to what they would consider typical development based off of research and theory that we were learning in the class. When it was one giant paper, it was overwhelming. But what I started doing was breaking it down. Okay, by this date, just tell me that you have lined up an adolescent for this interview. Okay, by this date, actually conduct your interview. By this date, have a draft of the introduction to your paper done, so on and so forth. And so we would break it down piece by piece by piece. And what it meant is that these students were anticipating the problems before they got to an emergency point later in the semester. So we were taking it step by step by step, and they could think about it step by step by step. And so I started introducing extra deadlines. I started introducing extra information in instructions for assignments, started bringing in extra rubrics, all of these extra things to help students along the way. In my research methods course, which is by far the most dreaded course that I teach, students are really scared of that one. I even have entire days in class where I sit down with them and I say, I get that you're overwhelmed. Let's talk through all of this. Write with me right now, run statistics with me right now. And we practice things together so that when they have questions in the heat of the moment, I'm there, I can help them out. So the scaffolding is there to help them learn theoretically. And what I'm finding is that it is helping them learn. At the end of the day, their grades are higher. They seem less stressed. People are a lot happier in the class. I'm seeing a better sense of community because we've been going through these projects all together. It's not me versus them or them versus one another because they're worried about grading on a curve or something like that. We've got that better sense of community. And really, I think the biggest benefit that I've seen is the lowered frustration and anger levels. Students are coming to me when they have questions before a deadline, when we can work things out, rather than after the deadline when it's too late, the damage has already been done to their grade.
Wow, thank you so much. So you have given us a good idea of what a scaffolded course looks like. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we turn our attention to the sense of community, building a sense of community and teamwork?
No, we can move to community.
Okay, good. So what strategy have you found to increase the sense of community and teamwork in your course?
Sure. So I think the scaffolding kind of naturally builds in that community because we're working together throughout the semester. We're working as a team. We're all working together rather than in competition with one another. But I think just being incredibly vocal throughout the semester to my students. We are a team. I want to see you all succeed. We're going into the trenches together. We're doing this together. I think vocalizing that throughout the semester, they start to pick up on that and they want to help each other out. Somewhere along the lines in scaffolding and having troubleshooting sessions in class, what I found is that I could turn questions on the class itself. So one student has a question, I don't know how to run this analysis. What analysis should I run? I can say, well, what do you guys think? And somebody else in the room can say, oh, well, I did this. Or maybe somebody's having trouble with data collection. I got so frustrated because my participants did this and this and this and this. And somebody else can say, yeah, they did this and this and this to me, and this is how I fixed it. Maybe this will work for you. And they start to help each other out, and it becomes that community atmosphere rather than a competitive or almost sterile atmosphere that you see in some classrooms.
Wow, I really like that because sometimes we take that for granted. Because when a student asks you a question, you could either answer it or you could ask the class to help them to answer it. And that in itself is a learning moment for the students. So I really like that. So what strategies do you have for providing effective and efficient feedback?
Yes. So when you scaffold, it can take a lot more effort, right? You have to provide a ton of feedback on a lot of things to make sure that they know where they're going in their next step. And I was getting overwhelmed in all of that. So I started finding some strategies that were working for me. First off is the easy one, automating where I can. So going into Canvas and allowing it to give automated feedback on in response to certain responses on assignments. So if they chose answer choice such and such, then they get this feedback. If they chose answer choice such and such, they get this feedback. Now, of course, that's not very helpful beyond that, beyond those Canvas type assignments. And so there are other things that are necessary. I learned through a virtual summit with you about text expanders. Those have been working very well for me. Allowing little shortcuts on the computer that will type out more extensive feedback. The old school way of handling that is copying and pasting into a Word document if you give similar feedback on assignments over and over and over again. Times New Roman font, 12-point font, 1-inch margin, so on and so forth. You don't have to type that every single time. You can copy and paste into papers. But I think there's also a lot of value in spreading out deadlines over the course of the semester, which happens naturally when you're doing the scaffolding course. So instead of all of these deadlines falling at the end of the semester, every single semester, and 20 pages of reading for every student times who knows how many students, when you start to break down these assignments, then those deadlines naturally spread themselves out, and you can save yourself a little bit of sanity in having them spread out. I've had luck in setting up assignments such that they do one piece and then the next and then the next. And each one of these, they're getting feedback from me. And then at the end of the semester, they turn in a final paper that is pretty much already written. They're putting together all of the pieces that they've been working on all semester, just incorporating that feedback that I've given them on those earlier drafts. So you get to that final paper, and in an ideal world, you get to it and they've corrected all of the things in the feedback that you've given them, and they all make A's. Well, that's very easy grading, right? It takes a lot of pressure off the end of the semester on my end and on theirs, I think.
Wow. It really sounds as if you're doing some great work with your students. How have they responded to the use of these strategies?
It's been very positive. So I'm finding that my student evaluations are going up, and their grades are going up on these assignments that have been scaffolded. So I would hope that that means that their learning is also increasing on those assignments. I'm finding too that they're vocalizing the sorts of things that I've been telling them through this process. So I tell them, I want to see you succeed. We're all in this together. And I'll get student evaluation comments that say, she really does want to see us succeed. Yes, I do. You're correct. So I think it's been a very positive feedback, but I'm really excited by how their skills, when they've been scaffolded out like this, seem to translate to other domains. So when I have students in other classes who have had me in the past, they know how to write. They know how to set things up in a standard APA format. They know how to work through longer term projects. And I like that they're gaining these transferable skills over and beyond course material, just time management skills and organizational skills they're picking up as well. I love that about it.
Excellent. What would you say to our viewers who resonate with what you have shared today, but they're a little bit hesitant to explore these strategies? What would be some first steps that they could do?
So I think I would admit that I was hesitant as well when I started all of this. I was in the mindset for quite a while that if students were turning in draft quality work, that it was a reflection that they just didn't care. And so it made me hesitant to spoon feed them or hold their hand. And I think it helped me a lot to just mentally adjust and understand that I'm not holding their hand. I'm not babying them. I'm helping them to build these basic life skills that they need. So when they are not putting forth their best effort, it's not a reflection on their character or their abilities. It's a reflection on them being overwhelmed. So if you can see it through that lens, it becomes a little bit easier to start breaking things down and helping these students out.
Great. And do you have any resources that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yes. So there is a file available with some links where I've given you a little bit more information about scaffolding and self-efficacy, a little bit about text expanders, and there's many more resources available through the Faculty Development Center on that. And I have provided a link to the Amazon purchase link to Small Teaching, which is a James Lang book that has really inspired me, particularly in my thinking about all of this scaffolding, because he's a big proponent of small teaching, making small changes one thing at a time. And scaffolding can be an overwhelming thing to try to implement. And I think it helps to say, you know what, I'm going to scaffold this one assignment in this one course and see where it goes. And then you can kind of build from there.
Great. Wow. Those sound like excellent resources, and viewers, I would encourage you to check them out. I glanced at them and I'll be checking them out again. So I'd encourage you to do the same. So Dr. Joyce, thank you very, very much for taking the time to share these practical strategies with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Great. And viewers, I encourage you to share this episode with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.